Hey YouTube, in this video I'm going to be talking about how to sprint the 400 meters properly. Unlike the 100 and the 200, the 400 meters is more similar to like playing a game of chess. It's a lot more mental than it is physical. For the 100 and the 200, it's more just you remember your race plan and you just follow it to the best of your abilities and then you just hope for the best essentially. But for the 400, literally anyone can win as long as the top speed of all the opponents are roughly the same. For example, what I mean when I say that is, for 100 meters, if you're going up against someone like Usain Bolt, same with 200 meters, you're you're going to lose. But if you was to go against Usain Bolt in the 400, you're probably still going to lose, but the gap would be smaller, and there's still a potential chance of you somehow pulling off a win over him. But obviously this chance is quite low if your top speed is nowhere near his. So if you can't even sprint anywhere near 40 kilometers per hour, then you probably don't stand a chance. But if you're quite closer, you could win. There's more of a variance, which is partially part of the reason why I like the 400. It doesn't really matter like what different level people are at, as long as they're within their personal bests are within a second and of each other, and the personal bests are actually quite accurate display of their abilities right now, you could win. Because I've noticed that usually if you peak early for the 400, you don't really stand a chance of being that time. For example, for 100 or 200, if you peak early, you could still get a better personal best, but it just won't be the best one, though the chances of that happening are low. But for 400, if you peak early, like you won't get near that time again. And if you peak late, you're probably going to be building up really in small, minuscule amounts up to your best by literal like milliseconds essentially. There won't be a big jump. Plus for 400, unless you're really like down close to like 45s or 44s, 43s, a second difference isn't really that big of a difference. Which is why for 400 is more of a game in the mind than it is of actually the race itself, because as long as you remember that everyone else that's on the field is hurting just as much as you are, or maybe even less, you can win. And this actually gets into the structure of the 400, because the structure of how we want to race a 400 is to make it so that we hurt as little as small, we want to hurt as little as possible, as late as possible. So if everyone else is hurting at 250 meters in, we want to try to be hurting at 300 or 350, or maybe not even at all, because the less you hurt, meaning the less lactic acid you've built up, or the more you've been able to handle it, the higher the chance of you winning. The reason being, the lactate is the game changer for the 400. For 100 and 200, there's lactate, but it's minuscule, especially for the 100. It's not really going to do much. But for the 400, it can make or break, because if you go around that bend in light speed, the first bend, and then you get to the 300, like I don't like, it's happened to Tyson Gay. In fact, you will get caught. It doesn't matter how fast you go out at the start, the lactate will just build up harder. Doesn't matter if you try to say, okay, let me just try and get through this faster so I can like time the lactate so it comes later. That doesn't work. To take it nice, not slow but relaxed. The lactate's still gonna come. The only difference is how much it's gonna build up. Obviously, if you haven't been doing your training before you got to the race, quite a lot of lactate is gonna build up. But that doesn't mean you can't handle the lactate. As long as you focus on being efficient with your movement patterns, you focus on your form, and you try to just relax, because the more tense you are, the more energy you're going to waste, and the quicker the lactate is going to build up, and the more it's just going to fight against you. So now we've got that out of the way. Now let's actually look at the structure of how to sprint the 400. So quite similar to the 200, there is a lot of floating. The purpose of floating in the 200 and the 400 is mainly just to recover energy. Obviously, you're still moving, so you can't exactly recover energy, but you kind of can. It's like, it's a small amount that you can get, but that small amount can be a big difference, because it is impossible to sprint an entire 400 meters, which is why people don't even associate it as a sprint. Same thing with the 100, because you can only really sprint all out 80 meters. So with that, we need to understand that the 400 is a sprint However, it's more a race of how slowly can I decelerate instead of how high is my top speed and how quickly can I get to the end. Because if it wasn't a case of how quickly can I decelerate or more focus on how high is my top speed, Usain Bolt's personal best for the 400 wouldn't be 45 seconds, whilst Wade van Niekerk's is 43:03. Usain Bolt's 45 isn't 45 on the dot, and Wade van Niekerk's I think he has a sub 10 time and sub 20 time for the 100 and 200, but it's nowhere near Usain Bolt's 958 and 1919. So that should just go to show that the 400 isn't so much about top speed, it's more about how you actually execute the race. And it's quite slightly different to how you do 100 and 200. So when you come outside the blocks and everything, obviously you're going to first want to start off with your drive phase. This is like the main part of the race, is the most important. If this will completely make or break how you race for the rest of the time. The drive phase and the start will determine whether this race is finished with you on the ground, glutes hurting, legs hurting, lactate everywhere, you struggling to breathe and walk, or whether you just get to that finish line, you just walk off a bit. You're panting a bit, you can feel some build up in your legs, but at the end of the day, it's not too much, you can just walk. This is the real game changer, because like I said in previous videos, most of the energy that you have, your energy reserves, will get used up in your start if you don't do it efficiently. So for here, it's even more important that you don't blast out the blocks and you just take it slowly, and you just want to gradually get up to top speed, gradually. So you want to, obviously the drive phase will probably still be about 60 meters, so you want to go through your drive phase, and once you get to whatever speed you manage to get to at that point, you want to float. Remember what I said about floating? Floating is just how you actively recover energy. Kind of like doing like a really, really slow jog after you've done something really intense. It's or a walk back instead of just stopping. It's not much better than just stopping and letting your body recover, but in the long run it is. You want to just float, hold this speed that you're at, make sure you focus on your form, don't get any faster, and then just go along the bend and start to go along the straight. And then when you get to the 200-meter mark, here is where you want to start getting up to your highest speed. So you're coming out floating, and now you actually want to start cycling your legs properly. Obviously be careful as you go around the blend. It would be much better if you just see where your position is and try and see if you can match them up until around 250. And at 250, if you still have more to give, you want to give that more. And just try and remember what I said with the 200 meters as well if you watched that video, but I'll go over it quickly again. You want to make sure that you angle yourself correctly in your lane so you can slingshot off once you get to the final 100-meter stretch. And the way to do that is, regardless of whether you're in the middle of the lane or the outside part of the lane, don't be right next to the lane on the left side. You always want to be at the middle or the outside. Right when you get to the sharpest curve, you want to take, right before you get there, you want to take like you want to slightly start to get closer and closer to the inside lane. And as you do that, you're just going to essentially negate most of the torque, and you're kind of just going to slingshot off, because everyone else, I mean, if you manage to pull this off, most likely everyone else won't be doing this because they're just dying from the lactate. Maybe some people might, but the thing is, if you did this the way I said to do it, your lactate is going to be less, so you'll be able to more efficiently get around that bend. And then from there, you just want to have your top speed, float and relax, and just continue. There's not really much else we can do here. Just for the final 100, float, relax, and just focus on your form. The lactate can be building up, but just remember, obviously I don't have to say anything about which part of your foot you're going to land on, but make sure that your heel recovery is high, your stride length is wide, and just make sure you're swinging your arms with full range of motion. Don't tighten up your arms, because your arms don't have any lactate, your legs do. But your arms will dictate how wide your legs are. So don't let your body try and trick you into thinking your arms should just be moving in a really tight fashion, because if you widen your arms, your legs are going to follow. So just go with that. Don't try and increase your stride frequency, because if you do that, you're going to trip, you're going to fall over. Without a shadow of a doubt, you're either going to almost fall over or you will fall over. You're going to wobble as well. It's just much better if you just focus on how you normally sprint and just try and replicate that. Just focus on that. Forget about everyone else. If someone else has passed you, you wasn't going to beat them anyway at this point. You've already done your race perfectly, so don't worry about them. As long as you did this perfectly, you are going to get a personal best. As long as your season went well, you're not coming back from any injuries or anything, and just continuing down the line, you get to the finish line. If you did the race properly, you're going to have barely any lactate, barely any, as long as you've done this correctly. The only problem is with the 400, it's quite hard to determine whether you've done it correctly, because obviously when you're doing it, you want to have even splits. So let's say your personal best for 200 was like 20 seconds. It'd make more sense to try and do the entire race in, what is it, like 21 to 21.5 with each 200-meter split, so that you don't end up dying. Because if you used to do the first 220 seconds, the last 200 is not going to be anywhere near that 20 seconds. So it's more difficult here than 100 or 200, where you can essentially just blast around. For like 100, obviously you're just going to follow the race plan and just get as fast as possible. But for 200, you can go out slow, not slow, but slower than the second 100. And then obviously you're gonna be going quite fast, like maybe 95% of your max speed. You would have reached maybe 80 by the first 100 meters, and for the final 100 you just max out and then you go. But for the 200, you can tell you can go faster, but the lactate is just killing you. So you try to go faster, and you might think you're going faster, but you might not actually be going faster. And maybe your first 200 was faster than the second 200 by quite a big amount. Reason being is, for 400, the race always starts off easy. So you just feel like, okay, I can go a bit hard, I can go this harder. But then later on, your misconception on the 400 will catch up, and then the lactate will burn you out, and then your final 100 will be slow. So if someone does pass you, maybe you didn't do the race as perfectly as you think you did, or maybe they're just better at this than you, they've been doing it for longer. Whatever the reason is, don't panic, don't tense up, because if you tense up, now not only will that person pass you, but there's definitely someone behind you that you can hear breathing who will pass you if you just start to tense up. Because if you tense up, the lactate is gonna start punching you over and over again. It's gonna have a field day. So make sure you stay relaxed and just focus on your form. As long as you keep doing that, you're gonna perform your best. As long as you don't have an injury, you're gonna probably get a personal best, quite simply. The only problem is, a lot of people, because the 400 meters is a sprint, a lot of people like to just think of it as, let me just blast around and hope for the best. There's no reason to blast around and hope for the best for the 400. The same way you can do 100, not even just that, a 60, 100, a 200, or a 300, and just feel a bit tired, is the same way you should be able to do a 400. If you finish the 400 meters and you're feeling dead and you just want to fall on the floor and crash and burn, you've probably used up the entirety of your energy by the 300-meter line. And the final 100 was literally just, I don't even know, like, it's kind of like we're rolling a tire down a hill. You rolled the tire up, and that was fine, but you wasted all your energy, and now you're just hoping that the tire, once you push it down, is going to go down. But the problem is, the hill isn't very, it has quite a decent amount of wind, and it's blowing in your face, and you're going down the hill far slower than it was going up the hill. So just make sure you just focus on just staying relaxed and not going out too fast. If you're going to be training for the 400, I would recommend doing a lot of 400-meter repeats. Not so much for training so you can build up the lactate, but understanding how much force you need to be producing for the first 200, so the second 200 isn't just suicide, essentially. If you like my video, like the video, let me know in the comment section below. Check the description, because anything I forget to say in the video, I always put in the description. And if you like my content, subscribe. Helps the channel out a lot. I post every 2 days at 1 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. If you don't know when that is, just hit the bell and then you'll be notified instantly.